Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are talking about a quick and dirty way to edit log footage in Davinci Resolve. Let's go. Clicked on this video because you want to learn how to color grade your log footage and you don't want to spend a lot of time. I sort of developed this technique over playing with log a lot recently, and it's been one of the techniques that I found works very quickly, very effectively, getting to the point where your log footage is looking prime and it's looking really good. This is not a creative effect. I'm not telling you how to do a teal and orange. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm just telling you how to get your log footage from the grey mucky mess that it usually is into the beautiful high dynamic range log that you can see floating around. Log's one of those things in our cameras that can scare us a little bit because it can be so fiddly. So let's just quickly jump into this color grade, guys, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the do's and don'ts for log. Let's do it. All right, guys, so here we are in Davinci Resolve with the color grading tab open. I've shot this scene. This is a cooking scene I shot for a client recently. I shot this in log. I'm going to show you how to do this. I reckon we can smash it out in less than 2 minutes. First thing I'm going to do, as you just saw, is add 3 nodes. I always do 3. This is, again, really basic. First thing I want to do is set this up right. So we've got our curves on. Going to go across to our waveform, make sure that we've got our waveform on, really important. On the bottom left hand side here, we've got the black point, this dot here, and up the top right hand side, we've got our white point. The first thing I always do when I'm working with log is set my blacks and set my whites, and I'm going to use the waveform over here to guide me. So I'm going to drag this across until those points are starting to hit the black. That's looking about right. So when that comes down to 0, those lines are touching down there, it means our blacks are black. And then I'm going to do the same for the whites, except I'm going to watch these bars up here, this waveform, until it hits around about there. And now you can see it's nice and spread out. We've decompressed all that data from the log, and we've got our blacks set at our blacks, our whites at our whites. Next thing I'm going to come over and do is just add a little bit of contrast, a little bit more. So I'm just going to do a rough point here, drag it down a little bit. I'm going to grab a rough point up here, drag it up a little bit, and now you're starting to see the log come to life. So if we take those two away just from that, you can see the difference it makes. So huge difference. Last thing I need to do to make sure my log is really popping is add that color back in that they take out. So we're going to just add in, I like to do 75. I'm working with S-Log. Whatever your preference is will change. Some people like to go a bit of a lower saturation but more color boost, but as you'll see, 75, bang, popping all that color back in. And then we're going to go over finally, and this is just a nice little tip for everything that I do, add some sharpening in. So we can see the before, and then we can see the after. Now you've basically got workable footage, nice and clean, nice and sharp, super easy to deal with. That is how I color grade my log footage. Like I said, this is not a creative thing. I'm not talking about teals and oranges here. I'm not talking about color grading per se. This is probably color correction, getting your log footage to the point where it's usable. But I think for a lot of us, the struggle is just getting to this point. I know it was for me. So let's go back to me and talk about the do's and don'ts of log. So let's talk about the do's and don'ts for shooting log. First of all, never ever shoot log unless you've got enough available light to shoot it. The idea of log is to get as much dynamic range as possible, and it naturally has a very high base ISO, which means there's a lot of noise in the image. Which also means the higher that you crank up the ISO to get the desired results for your log, the more noisy it's going to be. Naturally, log has more grain in it. So if you are shooting an event and it's late at night, you know, it might only be like candlelit or something like that, I would not recommend shooting with a log. I don't care if you've got an A7S3, I don't care if you've got some low light beast, I just wouldn't shoot with it. There are better picture profiles to use for that. You know, I don't think in those sort of situations where it's very dark and moody, people are going to really care about whether or not that you've got dynamic range. They're probably just going to more care about, are the colors right, are these things right, and it's more hard to do that when you've got more grain in the footage. So low light scenarios, not log friendly. Do's with log, and this is probably true of any sort of scenario, is shoot for the subject. In the footage that I showed you earlier, another segment of that, we had Walter the chef who was doing his thing. He's a white dude, so he has white skin, but he's also wearing a black blouse. So in other scenarios, you might have been able to expose for his skin, lose some of the detail in his vest. You might have been able to expose for his vest, but so sort of lose some of his skin in highlights. The special thing is we were outside shooting. It was a risk that the sun might pop out at any time. It was pretty lucky that it was just overcast all day, so it was beautiful footage. But for me, I wanted to shoot log just to make sure I was getting all the details. Also, you saw behind us, the courtyard was quite dark and I really didn't want to lose all the detail in the shadows there, so that's why I decided to shoot log while exposing for the white tablecloth in that without losing everything in the scene. I think it really made a massive difference. So when you're shooting log, make sure there's available light. What is log good for? What is it even good for? It's good for high dynamic range scenarios. What that means is there's a massive point of difference between your highlights and your shadows, that you just want to make sure that you got all the available data that you can out of your camera in that. Log is going to be the best for that. Tips for shooting log: just keep shooting it. I'm not going to suggest whipping it out in a client shoot when you're not very comfortable using it. If you've got enough balls to do that, good on you. I didn't. When I was getting more uncomfortable with it, I was shooting it by myself, going out and shooting it on random days out. You know, when I'm doing stuff for YouTube, I do a couple of scenes where I try and shoot in log, and sometimes it'll be shit, sometimes it'll be really good. And then I sort of just got more comfortable. That's pretty much it, guys. Log is not that hard. There's a lot of long YouTube videos out there that are very detailed if you want to take a deep dive into it. It is a little bit fiddly to use, but then again, it's just a picture profile, guys. It's like when you learn to color your favorite picture profile. That was a learning process. Learning to do log properly is a process. You learn to shoot with other picture profiles, you'll learn to shoot with log. Highly recommend it, guys. It's one of the things that we can do in our profession as filmmakers while there's all this gear getting thrown at us at YouTube and all this stuff being told that we need this to level up our game. It is one of the things that is in the camera that you have, hopefully. Well, it is if you're watching this video. It's in the camera that you have that you can use to up the production quality of your footage and really make it look a lot better. So thank you so much for joining me, guys. I appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.